A cool breeze brushed through the straw-thatched huts of Kajura village on the night the twins were born. The midwives whispered about the rare blessing, identical twin girls arriving under a bright crescent moon. Villagers gathered outside Chief Bala's large compound, chanting songs of joy. New life was always celebrated, but twins carried special significance. Some said they were tied to ancestral spirits, destined for greatness or ruin. In the soft glow of lantern light, Chief Bala stood in the courtyard, his face stern despite the cheers. Cradling the infants, Amina and Halima, he could hardly hide the turmoil in his eyes. His elderly advisor, Elder Jamal, shuffled toward him. Under the guise of congratulating the new father, Elder Jamal leaned closer and murmured words only Bala could hear. "Be warned, Chief. If these two remain together, they shall bring an end to your bloodline." Chief Bala gritted his teeth. He had hoped to avoid this prophecy. Yet the ominous words rang in his ears, igniting a storm of doubts. His wives, one his true love, the other a political alliance named Soraya, were oblivious to his racing thoughts. All they saw was a proud father welcoming two little girls who looked like perfect mirror images, one with a tiny birthmark behind her left ear, the other behind her right. Inside the candlelit room, Bala's first wife held the twins and cooed at them gently. "They are so beautiful," she said, eyes shining with maternal devotion. "Amina and Halima will bring blessings to us all." Outside, villagers kept celebrating. Children danced around, old women slapped their knees in laughter, while strong young men lit torches to guide well-wishers through the night. Yet in a far corner, Elder Jamal chanted under his breath, eyes rolling back as though in a trance. He sensed the future swirling around these twins like a fierce wind. And so it began, two newborns, revered by their people, yet overshadowed by a prophecy no one dared speak aloud. Chief Bala, though proud on the surface, felt a cold dread creep up his spine, because the prophecy declared that one twin must die if he wished to preserve his family's dominion. Little did the joyful onlookers know how soon that ancient curse would begin to unfold. Years passed, and the twins grew into intelligent, vibrant girls on the cusp of womanhood. They did everything together, eating, learning, playing, and sometimes finishing each other's sentences. Amina, always with a gentle smile, seemed more trusting and open-hearted, while Halima showed a keen sense of observation and cautious intellect. The day Sultan Idris arrived, the village buzzed with excitement. Rumors swirled about his cruelty, his vast wealth, and the dark mysteries that clung to him like a second skin. He came with armed guards and elaborate gifts, a chest of gemstones, exquisite fabrics, and a gilded sword said to have felled kings in distant lands. Chief Bala greeted him at the courtyard. The older man bowed, forcing a smile. "Sultan Idris," he began carefully, "your presence honors our village." The Sultan wasted no time. "I have heard whispers of your twin daughters," he said, voice echoing with a dangerous edge. "I seek to marry them both." Chief Bala's heart beat like a war drum, thunderous and piercing. He cast a wary glance at the regal figure before him. Sultan Idris was known for his merciless decisions and the unsolved disappearances of those who crossed him. Bala swallowed hard, remembering Elder Jamal's prophecy. Perhaps this was the opportunity he needed, an arrangement that would solve his dilemma. Clearing his throat, Bala attempted a cordial tone. It would be a rare honor to marry twins to so powerful a ruler. The Sultan's lips curled into a thin smile. "Indeed. But you should know, Chief Bala, that once the ceremony is complete, only one daughter will remain my bride." A chill ran through Bala as the Sultan's words sank in. He realized that Idris knew exactly how to exploit the prophecy. It was a straightforward trade: hand over both daughters, and let fate decide which one would survive. The tension in the air was palpable, as if even the palace guards held their breath. Behind a carved wooden screen, Amina and Halima huddled together, having overheard part of the conversation. They exchanged confused looks. Marriage to a sultan was an incredible honor, yet the mention of only one bride surviving filled them with unease. They didn't know what to make of it. But their father, standing before them, seemed resolute, perhaps too resolute. The next morning, Chief Bala gathered his family in the main hall. He had summoned both Amina and Halima, along with their mother and stepmother, Soraya. Tension festered like a wound that refused to heal. Holding a decorative staff in one hand, Bala addressed his daughters in a solemn voice. "Daughters, the Sultan himself has asked for your hands in marriage. This is an opportunity that could elevate our entire bloodline. You must prepare to leave with him." Amina's face lit up briefly with excitement. She had grown up hearing tales of grand palaces, jewels, and exotic adventures. Halima, however, felt a sliver of fear slither through her. She glanced at her father, noticing the stiffness in his gaze. It seemed off, almost mechanical. Their mother, a quiet yet deeply intuitive woman, grabbed their hands. Tears gathered in her eyes. "You cannot go," she whispered, voice quavering. "This marriage, it isn't right. There are things you don't understand." Before she could elaborate, Soraya, the stepmother, stepped forward. "Chief Bala has spoken," she said sharply. "These girls will marry the Sultan. Don't fill their heads with nonsense." The mother's protests fell on deaf ears. That night, she tried to speak with the twins in secret. "Listen to me," she urged in a hushed tone, her breath ragged with anxiety. "You're both in grave danger. There is a prophecy." Suddenly, Soraya appeared like a shadow in the doorway, her face locked in a sneer. "Enough of this. Come with me," she hissed, dragging the mother away by the arm. The twins tried to follow, but the door slammed in their faces. When they finally managed to force it open, their mother was gone, vanished without a trace. All through the next day, the compound buzzed with preparations for the twins' departure. Servants polished wooden carts, seamstresses adjusted wedding garments, and guards sharpened spears for the royal entourage. While gathering a few belongings from her mother's chamber, Halima stumbled upon a letter hidden under the bed. Its edges were worn, and it bore their mother's handwriting. Hands shaking, Halima read it. "One of you must die, or your father will lose everything. Trust no one, not even each other." Her heartbeat throbbed in her ears as she imagined the implications. Was this letter part of the prophecy she had heard rumors of? Could her own father truly be complicit in such a dark fate? Desperate to share her discovery, Halima ran to find Amina. But before she could speak, Chief Bala cornered her in the corridor. He snatched the letter from her trembling fingers and read it swiftly. His eyes narrowed, and a shadow crossed his face. "You pry into matters that do not concern you," he said coldly, crumpling the paper. "Keep silent, or it will cost you dearly. The Sultan waits. Do not disappoint him." Halima wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the look in her father's eyes was more terrifying than any threat. She lowered her gaze, realizing there was no one she could turn to now, not even her sister, who, though kind, remained blissfully unaware of the depth of their father's machinations. Shortly after dawn, Chief Bala, Soraya, and the twins set off for the Sultan's palace. Their small caravan, accompanied by royal escorts, rumbled along a dusty road framed by towering baobab trees. The journey was tense. Halima sat rigidly, replaying the words of the letter in her mind. She sensed an invisible barrier had formed between her and Amina. She longed to tell her sister everything, yet fear held her tongue. Amina sensed Halima's unease. She whispered, "Sister, are you all right? You've been quiet." Halima forced a small smile. "Just nervous about the unknown." From the lead carriage, Soraya glanced back at them, a smug expression on her face. Chief Bala, riding alongside on a horse, avoided making eye contact. His posture was stiff, as if he wanted this trip to be over with as quickly as possible. When they stopped at a village on the way to rest, the twins stretched their legs. Halima pulled Amina aside. She was about to speak, to reveal the ominous message, when a guard approached them. He handed them water and hovered near enough to overhear anything they might say. Halima quickly clammed up. That evening, when the caravan halted by a river to camp, Amina and Halima watched the sunset. The sky flared in brilliant shades of orange and pink, but there was a heaviness in the air that made it impossible to appreciate the beauty. Amina leaned her head on Halima's shoulder. "I wish Mother was here," she said softly. Halima swallowed hard, fighting the urge to spill everything. But the memory of Chief Bala's warning smoldered in her thoughts. "So do I," she replied. "So do I." The Sultan's palace rose from the horizon like a colossal beast of stone and marble. Tall minarets reached toward the sky, and elaborate courtyards bustled with palace guards in gleaming armor. Ornamental gardens stretched along the outer walls, filled with exotic flowers and peacocks strutting about. Upon arrival, Sultan Idris greeted them in a grand chamber. He eyed the twins with unsettling curiosity. "Amina and Halima," he said, his voice echoing in the vaulted hall. "You are both more exquisite than I'd imagined. Soon, one of you shall become my queen." Amina tried to keep her composure, offering a graceful bow. Halima did the same, though her heart thumped like a drum in her chest. That evening, while the palace prepared a lavish feast, a timid servant girl sneaked into Halima's new quarters. Her voice shook as she revealed dire news. "The Sultan has a twisted tradition," she whispered. "He demands a deadly competition whenever he marries twin sisters. Only one is meant to survive." Halima's eyes went wide. She glanced at the door to ensure no one was listening. "Why would my father allow this?" she hissed. The servant girl could only tremble in reply. "I've heard rumors that your father made a deal with the Sultan, something about a prophecy. Be careful, my lady. No one is safe in this place." That night, Halima scarcely slept. The words from the letter danced in her mind, alongside the servant's haunting revelation. She glimpsed a new truth: this was not just a simple marriage, but a cunning arrangement orchestrated by powerful men who cared more about their own ambitions than the lives of two young women. A hush fell over the palace the next day as the Sultan's personal guards escorted Amina and Halima into a grand, torchlit hall. Musicians played a hypnotic rhythm on carved drums, and flickering flames cast strange shadows on the marble pillars. At the center stood a masked priest cloaked in red robes. He raised his hands to signal silence, and the drums halted. His voice echoed eerily, "Under the gaze of the blood moon, the twins shall be tested. By dawn, one shall pass, and one shall be sacrificed to appease the ancient spirits." A hush of horror swept through the onlookers, many of whom were dignitaries, palace officials, and even spectators from the surrounding villages. Amina felt her blood run cold. She glanced at her father, expecting him to object. Chief Bala, however, remained impassive. His eyes bored into hers, offering no comfort. Halima leaned toward Amina. "This was his plan all along," she whispered. He knew everything." Amina's breath trembled. She had long believed their father loved them beyond measure. Now, that illusion cracked like old pottery. As the ceremony concluded, Sultan Idris stepped forward, his voice carrying a terrible finality. "Prepare yourselves, dear brides," he said with a thin smile. "At dawn, the blood moon test begins, and only one of you shall remain at my side." That night, the Sultan summoned Amina and Halima to a private courtyard. Guards stood at attention, their eyes as cold as the steel of their spears. Exotic flowers, glistening in moonlight, lined the marble walkway. With calculated poise, the Sultan addressed the twins. "I offer one chance at mercy," he declared. "Choose among yourselves, one may leave the palace now, never to return. The other must stay and face the trial at dawn. Decide quickly." Amina looked at Halima, her face expressing heartbreak. She expected Halima to refuse the offer, for the two had always been inseparable. But Halima spoke up, voice trembling, "I will go." Amina's eyes widened. "Halima! You would leave me to face this alone?" An awkward pause stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Halima swallowed. She was torn, haunted by the memory of the letter, by her father's coldness, and by the terrifying knowledge that one twin would die no matter what. Perhaps leaving was their only chance to save at least one life. Guilt weighed heavily in her heart, but she forced the words out, "I can't watch us both walk into a trap. If one of us can be free, maybe that's best." Amina, stunned and hurt, turned her face away. Before Halima could plead her case, Chief Bala's guards materialized, seizing Halima's arms. "There is no leaving," one guard sneered. "His Majesty changed his mind. Both of you will face the trial." The Sultan nodded in agreement, obviously relishing the tension. "Yes," he said with a smirk. "This is too entertaining to end so quickly." At the break of dawn, the palace courtyard transformed into a labyrinth of tall hedges and narrow corridors leading to a single iron door. Overhead, the sky held a lingering hue of crimson, reminiscent of the so-called blood moon. The masked priest reappeared, proclaiming the rules in a hollow, chanting voice, "Beyond these walls lies a maze. Within, blades swing and traps lie in wait. Only one key exists to open the door at the far end, and only one may pass." Amina and Halima stood side by side at the entrance, fear etched into their every feature. Sultan Idris and Chief Bala observed from a raised balcony, their expressions unreadable. Soraya, the stepmother, hovered nearby, her lips curled in smug satisfaction. A loud gong reverberated, signaling the start. The twins bolted into the maze. At first, they tried to stick together, weaving through low-hanging branches and ducking under swinging blades that emerged from hidden mechanisms in the walls. The metallic crash of triggered traps echoed around them. Amina led the way at one turn, only for a blade to slice through the air, grazing her arm. She yelped, stumbling back. Halima helped her up, heart-pounding. They moved deeper into the labyrinth's labyrinth, passing walls lined with spinning spikes. Suddenly, Halima spotted a glimmer of gold hanging on a chain, the key. She scrambled onto a ledge, ignoring the small daggers whizzing past, and managed to grab it. Amina gasped in relief. "We have it! Now we can escape together." But Halima's eyes flicked up toward the balcony. Chief Bala gave her a curt nod, as if commanding her to save herself. Paralyzed by the conflicting emotions of love for her sister and the dread of the prophecy, Halima froze. Amina cried out in warning as another set of blades whooshed overhead. "Halima, watch out!" In a heartbeat, Halima tucked the key into her sash, then seized Amina's hand. They sprinted toward the exit, footsteps echoing in the stone corridors. But as they neared the final door, a monstrous guillotine-like blade crashed down, separating them momentarily. Catching her breath, Halima made a desperate decision. She took advantage of the opening. She slipped through the door, leaving Amina behind. "I'm sorry," she called through tears. "I don't know what else to do." On the other side of the heavy door, Halima tumbled onto the palace courtyard, sweat pouring down her face. She clutched the key like a talisman, heart pounding wildly. The sun dazzled her eyes after the labyrinth's darkness. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her, relief that she had escaped, guilt that she had left Amina behind. She expected to see the Sultan or her father congratulating her, but instead, stern-faced guards snatched the key and forced her to her knees. Amina's anguished scream resonated from within the maze. Halima's chest constricted, every fiber of her being wanting to tear back through that iron door. But the guards pinned her arms behind her back. Sultan Idris strolled over, clapping slowly. "Well done, child," he remarked, with a sneer. "Though your father told me you'd be the one with the stronger will. Your reward, however, is not freedom." Halima's eyes darted around, searching for Chief Bala. He stood a few paces away, expression grim. He did not intervene. It was at that moment Halima realized just how far her father's betrayal ran. This was all part of a plan, to ensure one daughter survived, even at the cost of the other's life. She bowed her head, silent tears coursing down her cheeks. She thought of Amina, alone in the labyrinth. She could only pray her sister found a way out. In a dimly lit side chamber, Halima was dragged before the Sultan. He lounged on a velvet divan, swirling dark wine in a goblet. A ring studded with a ruby the size of an egg gleamed on his finger. "You believed winning would guarantee your life," he purred, gesturing for a guard to throw Halima to the floor. "But your father struck a deal with me long ago. The moment both of you set foot in my palace, your fates were sealed." Halima managed to raise her head, anger flashing in her eyes. "Why? Why do you do this to twin sisters?" Sultan Idris took a leisurely sip of wine. "Power, my dear. I've been told that sacrificing the twin who fails cements my rule, granting me continued favor from the old spirits. Each year, I invite twins. Each year, both eventually perish, no matter who wins." Halima felt sick. The reality of the horrors inflicted on unsuspecting families by this tyrant crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. And her own father willingly participated, driven by an ancient curse he feared more than the loss of his daughters. She closed her eyes, fighting despair. "You're a monster." Idris smirked. "And I remain unchallenged. That's the beauty of power, child." Back in the maze, Amina's legs burned from running. She had narrowly avoided 2 swinging axes and was now limping toward what looked like a dead end. Her heart hammered in her chest, outraged at Halima's betrayal but also terrified for her own life. Then, in a dusty corner, she noticed a small opening in the stone wall, a hidden tunnel. She squeezed herself through the narrow gap, the sharp edges scraping her arms and shoulders. Her lungs heaved with stale air as she crawled, hearing distant clangs of resetting traps. After minutes that felt like hours, she tumbled into a dim corridor lit by a single torch. Leaning against a damp stone wall, she struggled to catch her breath. That was when a hunched old woman shuffled into view, her voice rasping like wind over desert sand. "You have found the hidden path," the woman said. "Wise choice, child." Amina blinked. "Who are you?" The old woman cackled softly. "No one of importance. But I do know the prophecy can still be broken. It will require blood, though. Blood from the one who betrayed you, or from the father who set this in motion." Confusion and anger swirled within Amina. She was uncertain whether to trust this stranger, but she had little choice. "I need to save my sister," she whispered. "No matter what she did, she's still my other half." The old woman's eyes gleamed. "Then hurry. The trial has ended, but your father's plot continues. The Sultan will not spare her. Hurry, before it's too late." Escaping through another hidden passage, Amina found herself in a forgotten wing of the palace, a place of crumbling archways and damp corridors. To her shock, she encountered a group of women huddled in a dusty chamber. They looked half-starved and frightened. "Who are you?" Amina asked, her voice echoing off the walls. One woman stepped forward, her cheek bearing a scar. "We are the survivors, or rather, the discarded wives, of Sultan Idris. He marries, he kills, then moves on. We were too valuable to murder outright or too politically connected to dispose of publicly. So he locks us away." Amina's heart clenched with empathy. "He's trying to kill my sister, and he has my father's blessing. I have to stop him." A younger woman, eyes shining with renewed hope, said, "We've prayed for a chance to end his tyranny. But we're stuck here, with no weapons or allies." Amina looked at the group, determination lighting her face. "If we join forces, we can help each other. I know part of the way through the palace. The guards might be distracted. Let's seize the opportunity." A murmur of agreement rippled through them. Bolstered by a shared desire for freedom and revenge, they devised a plan. They would break out of this shadowy corridor, gather any weapons they could find, and confront the Sultan in his throne room. There, they would rescue Halima, or die trying. Midnight loomed in the Sultan's courtyard, where a dreadful stage had been erected. Halima stood with her hands tied behind her back, flanked by guards. Torches illuminated the platform and murmurs of unease rippled among the palace onlookers. Sultan Idris rose from his throne-like seat. Halima, since you won the trial, I grant you the honor of being sacrificed under the sacred moonlight. His voice dripped with cruelty. Chief Bala watched from a corner of the courtyard, face grim but unmoving. Soraya, standing next to him, suppressed a pleased smirk. Halima felt her knees shake. She was about to meet a gruesome end, and her father was complicit. A guard forced Halima to kneel. Another raised a sword high, preparing to deliver a death blow. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. Suddenly, a thunderous cry pierced the darkness. "Stop!" All heads turned as Amina, followed by the group of hidden wives, burst into the courtyard. Some carried crude weapons, makeshift spears, broken table legs, or knives snatched from unaware guards. "Amina!" Halima gasped, equal parts relief and shock. The Sultan sneered, motioning for his guards. "Kill them all." The courtyard erupted into chaos. Spears clashed against swords, and the wives fought with a fierce determination fueled by years of torment. Amina dodged a guard's attack and rushed to Halima, cutting her bonds with a dagger she had seized. Halima scrambled to her feet, massaging her wrists. "Amina," she breathed. "I'm so sorry. I thought leaving you was the only way." Amina's expression flickered with hurt, but also with the love that bound them as twins. "Let's talk about it later," she replied. "Right now, we fight." Side by side, they fended off the guards that tried to corner them. The wives attacked from all angles, creating a chaotic environment. Palace officials screamed and fled as the courtyard turned into a battlefield. Sultan Idris, still enthroned, pounded his staff on the ground in anger. Finally, the guards realized they were being overwhelmed by the sudden uprising. Many fell back, uncertain how to counter an insurrection they never anticipated. Sensing danger, Sultan Idris stood and swiftly exited through a side passage that led to the underground tunnels. "We must stop him," Halima said, breathing heavily. "Before he escapes for good." Amina nodded. "Let's go. We end this tonight." Their eyes locked in unspoken agreement. Despite betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, they would stand together against the evil that ensnared them both. Tracing the Sultan's path, Amina and Halima navigated a labyrinth of corridors deep beneath the palace. They knew time was running short. If he reached a secret exit, he could vanish and regroup, potentially returning with even greater force to enact his vengeance. At last, they arrived in a candlelit chamber with walls lined by crates and barrels. The air smelled musty, like old parchment and damp earth. Standing near a heavy wooden door was the Sultan, a twisted grimace on his face. Behind him, chained to the wall, was a figure the sisters recognized instantly, their mother, alive but weak. Amina nearly cried out, "Mother!" Their mother lifted her head, eyes swimming with relief and tears. "My daughters, you found me." Just then, Chief Bala stepped from behind a column, drawing a ceremonial dagger. "This ends here," he declared, voice shaking with fury or fear, perhaps both. "I did this for power, for our family. I never wanted both of you to die. But the prophecy demanded a sacrifice." Halima glared at him. "You betrayed us from the day we were born. How could you?" Chief Bala sneered, though his eyes flickered with anguish. "You don't understand what it's like to live under the shadow of a prophecy. One of you had to die to save the rest of us. I had no choice." Amina advanced, fists clenched. "There is always a choice." Sultan Idris, sensing the tension, tried to slip away. But Halima blocked his path. "Where do you think you're going?" she hissed. The room reverberated with confrontation. Amina lunged forward, brandishing a makeshift spear she had taken from one of the guards. Chief Bala thrust his ceremonial dagger toward her, nearly striking her shoulder, but she twisted aside. Halima darted toward the Sultan, who parried her attacks using a slender sword. She matched him blow for blow, fueled by rage and adrenaline. Sparks flew each time their blades collided. Moments later, in the chaos, Bala turned to help the Sultan. Yet his movement was mistimed. He lunged at Amina but instead collided with the Sultan's sword arm just as Halima forced his blade downward. The dagger in Bala's own hand plunged straight into Sultan Idris's side. A strangled gasp escaped the Sultan. He staggered, dropping his sword, eyes going wide with shock. Crimson spread across his luxurious robes. He collapsed to the ground, blood pooling around him. Chief Bala, too, sank to his knees. In the frantic scuffle, he had suffered a deep slash across his chest. Looking up at his daughters, his face drained of color, he rasped, "The prophecy, it was always about me. I was the curse, not you." Darkness filled his gaze as he exhaled his last breath, slumping beside the dying Sultan. A haunted silence blanketed the chamber, punctured only by the ragged breaths of Amina and Halima. Their mother, still chained, wept softly. The prophecy had come to a climax not in the way any had expected, but in a fiery collision that claimed the very people who had orchestrated their suffering. With the Sultan and Chief Bala gone, the palace quickly fell into disarray. Guards who had been fighting the rebellious wives surrendered, no longer bound to serve a dead tyrant. Servants rushed to free prisoners, and the once opulent corridors were filled with relief and confusion in equal measure. Amina and Halima unchained their mother, who collapsed into their arms. Tears of joy and sorrow mingled as they guided her toward the main courtyard, which had become a makeshift sanctuary for wounded rebels and startled onlookers. The sisters surveyed the aftermath. The grand palace that had once symbolized wealth and fear was now a shattered throne of ambition. Freed prisoners roamed cautiously, uncertain of their future. The wives who had fought alongside Amina embraced one another in cautious victory, finally seeing a glimmer of hope after years of cruelty. Later that evening, as the dust settled, Amina and Halima stood together on a palace balcony overlooking the city. The air was tinged with the scent of smoke and the echoes of distant cheers. Their father's body, along with the Sultan's, had been taken away by guards who no longer had a master to serve. Halima laid a trembling hand on Amina's shoulder. "We're finally free. But we've lost so much." Amina nodded. "Father. I can't forgive him, not after everything. But at least no more twins will suffer here." Their mother approached, hugging both daughters close. For a moment, they allowed themselves the solace of family unity, even if it was fractured and haunted by tragedy. Back in Kajura village, the return of the twins and their mother sparked intense emotion. Word spread quickly that the Sultan was dead, and that Chief Bala had been the true villain of a prophecy. The villagers, who once revered Chief Bala, were stunned to learn of his betrayal. Yet peace did not come easily. One night, as Amina tried to sleep in her old room, a chill coursed through her spine. She bolted upright, sure she had heard someone call her name. She peered around the darkened room, heart racing. Then a whisper, faint but clear, caressed her ear like a ghostly breeze, "The blood debt is not yet paid." She leaped out of bed, certain it was no dream. Searching the hall, she found no one. Only the flicker of a lantern remained, casting wavering shadows. Had the prophecy truly ended, or was some remnant of its dark power lingering in unseen corners? In the morning, she confided in Halima, who frowned thoughtfully. "Perhaps we angered the spirits by not performing the proper rites," she speculated. Father's death might not have satisfied the prophecy. Amina said nothing, but anxiety gnawed at her. She had hoped that once the Sultan was defeated and their father was gone, they would finally be free. Now she feared the opposite, that their battle with fate was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and the twins tried to rebuild a semblance of normal life. Their mother quietly tended to the household, her spirits still fragile from years of confinement. Soraya, stripped of her position and scorned by the entire village, vanished without saying goodbye. Some rumored she had fled to a distant land, unable to face the disgrace. Amina and Halima often walked by the river at sunset, recalling memories from their childhood, how they used to race each other along the bank or share secrets under the old baobab tree. The village greeted them with cautious reverence, for they were now seen as both saviors and potential harbingers of doom. No one dared speak the prophecy aloud, yet all eyes lingered on the twins, uncertain whether another wave of disaster might befall them. One cool evening, as the sky turned a deep violet, an old woman emerged from the forest shadows by the water's edge. She wore a ragged cloak and walked with a cane. Though her face remained half-hidden, the twins sensed they had seen her before, perhaps the same woman who appeared in the maze? She smiled, revealing toothless gums. Her voice carried a dark melody. "Twins can never escape their fate," she crooned. Amina and Halima froze, hearts thudding in their chests. The old woman continued, "Your father's death was but one thread cut from a tapestry. The spirits are restless, and the debt is not erased." Before they could question her, the old woman retreated into the forest with eerie grace. The twins exchanged a troubled glance. Despite everything they had overcome, the trials, the betrayals, the lethal conspiracies, they realized the prophecy was not so easily banished. They stepped closer to each other, hands entwined, as the final streaks of twilight vanished from the sky. In that moment, they understood that while they had survived one nightmare, another might lurk just beyond the horizon. Yet they would face it as they always had, together, twin sisters bound by blood, love, and a destiny yet to be fully unraveled. The end.